Some stories stay with you forever. Here's one of them. Don't forget to like and subscribe, leave a comment, and let us know where you're watching from. A 7-year-old girl stood in a courtroom and announced, "I am my mother's lawyer." The judge thought it was a joke until he found out she knew more about the law than many a seasoned attorney. "I am my mother's lawyer," said Lily, a 7-year-old girl standing before the judge. A small briefcase clutched in her tiny hands, and her chin held high as if she were a professional with decades of experience. The third family courtroom fell into absolute silence. It was as if someone had paused the world for a few seconds. Judge Harrison, a 58-year-old man with 3 decades on the bench, slowly removed his glasses and carefully cleaned them, as if he couldn't see straight. Never in his entire career had he witnessed anything like it. A child presenting herself as a lawyer in his courtroom. "I'm sorry, little one, but I think you're mistaken. This is a courtroom, not a place for games," he said gently, thinking the girl had simply gotten lost from her parents. "I'm not playing, Your Honor," Lily replied, her voice firm but her heart pounding. "I am here to represent my mother, Jane Peterson, in the custody case, file number 00345Z224. My father, David Stevens, is trying to get custody of me for ulterior financial motives." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Lawyers stopped checking their phones. Clerks put down their pens. Secretaries turned to get a better look. Even the security guard by the door came closer, intrigued by this unprecedented situation. On the right side of the room, David Stevens, 42, clad in an expensive dark suit, started to laugh loudly. "Your Honor, this is ridiculous. The girl is playing school. We can't waste time on child's play." Beside him, Attorney Mark Anderson, a sophisticated 50-year-old man in a $3,000 suit, immediately stood up. "Your Honor, I earnestly request that the minor be removed from the room. This is a disrespect to the court and to legal procedures." But Lily didn't move an inch. Her brown eyes shone with a determination that didn't match her age. "Your Honor, according to Article 28 of the Children and Adolescents Statute, I have the right to be heard in any judicial proceeding that involves my interests." The silence returned to the courtroom. But this time it was different. It was the silence of shock. A 7-year-old girl had just cited a specific law with the precision of a seasoned jurist. Attorney Anderson blinked several times, trying to process what he had just heard. "She memorized a few phrases on the internet, Your Honor. Any child can do that these days with a quick Google search." "Then may I continue, Doctor?" Lily turned to him with a disarming politeness. "Article 1634 of the Civil Code establishes that parental authority includes the duty to direct the upbringing and education of their children. My father failed in this duty when he abandoned me for 3 consecutive years." The lawyer choked on his own saliva. David abruptly stopped laughing. "Article 1583 of the same code," she continued, "states that custody will be unilateral when one of the parents does not provide adequate conditions for the exercise of parental authority. Article 1586 establishes that this power cannot be exercised against the interest of the minor." The judge leaned forward, completely fascinated. In 30 years on the bench, he had never seen an experienced lawyer cite laws with such fluency, let alone a child. Furthermore, Lily opened her homemade briefcase, a school folder decorated with unicorn stickers but filled with organized documents. "Here, I have evidence that proves my father's true intentions." She took an old cell phone from the folder, a simple device that contrasted with the legal sophistication of her words. "I managed to record a conversation where he confesses he only wants me because of the $2 million inheritance I'm going to receive from my grandfather." The bombshell exploded in the courtroom. David turned white as a sheet. Attorney Anderson stood up so quickly he knocked over his chair. From the back of the room, where she was seated in the last row, Jane Peterson, a 32-year-old woman, thin, wearing a simple but clean blouse, covered her face with her hands and began to cry. "This is inadmissible!" Attorney Anderson shouted, losing his composure completely. "A clandestine recording, illegal evidence. I request it be rejected." Lily looked at him with impressive calm. "Doctor, the recording is not clandestine when it is made by me to protect my own rights. Law 13441 of 2017, Article 4, Section 2, guarantees a child the right to seek protection." The lawyer was struck speechless. A 7-year-old girl had just given him a law lesson. "Your Honor," Lily continued, "may I play the recording so everyone can hear?" The judge nodded, still trying to process the surreal situation. "Yes, you may." Lily manipulated the cell phone with small but steady fingers. David's voice echoed through the courtroom, clear and incriminating. "Listen carefully, lawyer. I want custody of the girl, and I want it fast. I don't care what you have to invent." The courtroom was in a deathly silence. Every word of the recording sounded like hammer blows. "The girl is going to inherit some good money from her grandfather when she turns 18. I'm talking about almost $2 million. If I get custody, I'm the one who gets to manage that money." People in the audience began to shake their heads in indignation. It was impossible to hear that and not feel a sense of outrage. "The girl's mother knows nothing about the inheritance. That woman can barely read, let alone understand inheritance. By the time she finds out anything, I'll have already taken care of everything." His cruel laughter on the recording made several people whisper curses under their breath. Jane cried even more loudly, emotional and humiliated at the same time. "So it's settled. File the custody request tomorrow. Claim the mother is unfit. Invent that she leaves the child alone, that she has no structure, all those things you guys know how to do." Lily paused the recording, and silence returned to the room. She looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor, this conversation was recorded on March 15th at 2:30 in the afternoon. 3 days later, on the 18th, my father filed for custody, claiming those exact same lies." She took more papers from the folder. "Here is a copy of the petition. He claims my mother leaves me alone for hours, that our home has inadequate structure, that I don't have proper academic support." The judge took the documents, checking each line. "And are these allegations true?" "They are all false, Your Honor." Lily organized other papers in front of her. "I brought proof that disproves this. First, my school report card from the last 2 years." She handed the pages to the judge. "As you can see, I am the best student in my class in all subjects. English, math, science, history. My overall average is 9.8. The judge examined the documents, impressed not only by the grades, but by the girl's impeccable organization. "Second," Lily continued, "a statement from my school, confirming that I am never late, I am always well cared for, well fed, and that my mother actively participates in all school meetings." Attorney Anderson tried to compose himself. "Your Honor, school documents can be easily manipulated by interested parties." "Are you accusing my school of falsifying documents?" Lily asked, turning to him with a serious expression that made the man swallow hard. "I didn't say that exactly. Because if you are, I can call my teacher, Mrs. Evans, here right now to testify. She is waiting in the courthouse hallway." The judge smiled for the first time during the hearing. "Call your teacher, Lily." The courtroom door opened, and Mrs. Evans walked in. She was a 40-year-old woman, with black hair tied in a bun, wearing a blue blazer and a black skirt that made her look more like a lawyer than a teacher. When she saw Lily commanding the hearing with such competence, her eyes filled with tears of pride. "Mrs. Evans," the judge addressed her, "can you tell us about your student Lily's family situation?" "I can, Your Honor." Mrs. Evans positioned herself next to Lily, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder in a show of support. "I have known Lily and her family for 2 years. Jane is an exemplary mother. She works very hard, but has never neglected her daughter's care. Is the child ever left alone? Never, Your Honor. Lily is at school for the full day. When classes end, she stays with me in the teacher's lounge, doing her homework until her mother comes to pick her up. She's always well fed, her uniform is clean, she has all her school supplies. And what about the father? Does he participate in her school life? Mrs. Evans looked directly at David, who was trying to hide in his chair. In 2 years, Your Honor, he has appeared at the school exactly 0 times. He has never asked about her grades, her behavior, or any special needs his daughter might have. For all practical purposes, he simply does not exist in Lily's school life. That's not true, David exploded, standing up from his chair. I have always cared about my daughter. Lily turned to him with her arms crossed, assuming a posture that impressed everyone present with its maturity. Then tell me, Father, what is my teacher's full name? What grade am I in? What is my favorite subject? What is my best friend's name? When is my birthday? David was completely silent. He couldn't answer a single basic question about his own daughter. I'll help you, Lily said with a coldness that cut everyone present to the heart. My teacher's name is Mrs. Evans. I'm in the 2nd grade. My favorite subject is English. My best friend is named Julia. My birthday is on September 12th. David's embarrassment was visible to all. I don't need to memorize these things. You don't need to memorize, Father. You need to be present. You need to be there. You need to love for real, not pretend to love for money. The courtroom was in total silence. That simple sentence from a 7-year-old summarized the entire tragedy of the case. Your Honor, Lily continued, I have one more important piece of evidence. She took another document from her folder. Proof that my father has not paid child support for exactly 3 years and 2 months. $0. How do you survive? The judge asked, genuinely curious about their situation. My mother works as a cleaner for Total Cleaners. She leaves home at 5 a.m. and returns at 8 p.m. She earns 1.5 times the minimum wage. It's not a lot of money, but she manages to give me everything a child needs. Food on the table, clean clothes, school supplies, medical care when necessary. Lily paused, looking at Jane in the back of the room. And most importantly, Your Honor, she gives me true love every day. Jane cried profusely, moved to hear her daughter defend her with such wisdom and maturity. Therefore, Lily turned her attention back to the judge. According to Article 1566 of the Civil Code, which establishes the duties of spouses and, by extension, of parents to support, raise, and educate their children, my father failed in all aspects. Attorney Anderson was officially out of arguments. A 7-year-old girl was giving him a law lesson he could never refute. According to Article 1637 of the same code, Lily continued, unrelenting, parental authority is extinguished by the practice of acts contrary to good morals. Abandoning a daughter for 3 years and then trying to use her as a source of income fits perfectly into that definition. The judge made some notes, clearly impressed by the girl's legal knowledge. Lily, do you have anything else to present? I do, Your Honor, but first, I would like to exercise a right guaranteed by law, 13431 of 2017. What right? The right of the child to be heard in judicial proceedings that concern them. I want to speak directly to you about what I feel and what I want. The judge nodded solemnly. You may speak, Lily. The girl took a deep breath, organized her thoughts, and began to speak with a maturity that moved everyone present. Your Honor, for 7 years of my life, I wondered why my father didn't live with us, why he only showed up every now and then, why he never played with me like my friends' dads did. Her voice trembled slightly, but she continued to be firm. I used to think it was my fault, that I wasn't a good enough daughter, that if I got better grades, if I behaved better, maybe he would come home. Several people in the courtroom discreetly wiped their eyes. But 3 weeks ago, I found out the truth. My father didn't abandon me, because I wasn't good enough. He abandoned me because to him, I'm just a child, not a daughter, and now he wants to use me as a tool to get rich. Lily turned to David, who couldn't look her in the eyes. Father, I don't hate you, but I also don't want to be your object for profit. I want to be loved for who I am, not for the money I can make you. The courtroom was in absolute silence. Even the most experienced clerks were visibly moved. Therefore, Your Honor, I use this moment to make 2 official requests. What requests? First, that my custody remains with my mother, who loves me for real, and who raised me with dignity, even without a lot of money. And the second, Lily took a deep breath before dropping the bombshell that would leave everyone speechless. Second, I formally renounce my grandfather's inheritance. I do not want the $2 million. The courtroom erupted in gasps of surprise. Even the judge's eyes widened. Lily, are you sure about what you're saying? I'm absolutely sure, Your Honor. I'd rather live with love and dignity by my mother's side than be rich with a father who doesn't truly love me. David stood up desperately. She can't do that. She's a minor. She doesn't have the capacity to renounce. You're mistaken, Father, Lily replied calmly. Article 1804 of the Civil Code allows for the renunciation of an inheritance through a legal representative. My mother is my legal representative and will sign the renunciation on my behalf. Attorney Anderson made one last desperate attempt. Your Honor, this is absurd. The minor is clearly being manipulated. Manipulated by whom, Doctor? The judge asked with irony. By the mother who works 12 hours a day to support her? By the teacher who taught her to defend herself? Or by the father who wants to use her to get rich? Lily approached the judge's bench. Your Honor, may I ask a personal question? You may. Do you have children? I have 2. And do they know that you love them? Of course they know. I envy them, Lily said with devastating simplicity, because until today I never knew if my father truly loved me. Now I know he doesn't. How do you know? Because someone who truly loves is unable to hurt the person they love. My father is willing to take me away from my mother, who is my whole life, just to get access to my money. That's not love, Your Honor, that's pure greed. The judge remained silent for long seconds, visibly touched by the maturity of that extraordinary child. Lily, he finally said, you are a very special girl. I have never seen anything like it in all my years on the bench. Thank you, Your Honor. May I continue presenting the other evidence? Yes, you may, Ms. Lily. The affectionate nickname echoed through the courtroom like an official recognition. That girl had won not only the judge's respect, but that of everyone present, and she still wasn't finished. She had more ammunition in her unicorn folder, more devastating evidence, more arguments that would make David regret forever having underestimated his daughter. The first round was over, and Lily had won by technical knockout, but the fight wasn't over yet. You may continue, Ms. Lily, the judge had said, and that affectionate nickname had echoed through the courtroom as an official recognition. Lily organized her papers with the precision of an experienced lawyer, while Attorney Anderson was sweating profusely, and David buried his face in his hands, knowing he was lost. Thank you, Your Honor, Lily said, taking more documents from her unicorn folder. Now I will prove that all of my father's allegations are fabricated lies. She carefully opened a laminated sheet. Here is the floor plan of our apartment, drawn by the building administration itself. There are 2 bedrooms, a living room, a kitchen, a bathroom, and a service area, a total of 45 square meters. The judge examined the document. And what problem does your father claim about the dwelling? He stated in the petition that we live in an unsanitary room without minimal living conditions, Lily read from the petition. But as you can see, we have adequate space for 2 people. Attorney Anderson tried to defend himself. Your Honor, Physical space does not mean adequate conditions. You are right, Doctor, Lily interrupted him politely. That's why I brought this. She took out a clear folder full of photographs of our home taken last week. As you can see, we have suitable furniture, a working refrigerator, a stove in perfect condition, a television, a study table where I do my homework every day. The photos passed through the judge's hands. They showed a small apartment, but it was extremely clean and organized, with everything arranged with care. This is my bedroom that I share with my mother, Lily continued, pointing to a photo. We have 2 beds, a wardrobe, a shelf with my school books. Over there is my study table, where I learned all the laws I'm citing today. David could no longer look at his daughter. He knew that every word of hers was true, and that every lie he had invented was being publicly exposed. My father also alleged that I stay home alone while my mother works, Lily continued, consulting the petition. That is false. I can prove it. She took a letterhead paper from the folder. Here is a statement from the municipal school professor John Smith, where I study. It confirms that I am at school for the full day, from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And after 6 p.m., the judge asked. After 6 p.m., my mother picks me up and we go home together. We have dinner, she helps me with my homework, we watch television and we go to sleep. I'm never alone, Your Honor. Mrs. Evans, who was next to Lily, confirmed with a nod. That's true, Your Honor. Jane is punctual every day to pick up Lily. Attorney Anderson made another desperate attempt. But what about on weekends and during school holidays? Lily smiled for the first time during the hearing. Excellent question, Doctor. On weekends, my mother doesn't work. We are together all the time. We go to the park, to the supermarket. She teaches me to cook. And during the holidays, I stay at Mrs. Carmen's house, our neighbor, who takes care of me while my mother works. And who is this Mrs. Carmen? The judge asked. Carmen Rodriguez, a retired woman, 68 years old. She has lived in apartment 302 of our building for 15 years. She is also here today to testify, if necessary. The judge looked at the audience, and a kind elderly lady waved from the 3rd row. Ma'am, would you please come forward? Mrs. Rodriguez got up with difficulty, leaning on a cane, but with a proud smile on her face. She was a small woman with white hair, wearing a simple but impeccable floral dress. Mrs. Rodriguez, the judge addressed her gently, do you know Lily's family? I have known them for 2 years, Doctor, she replied with a clear voice. Jane is a hard-working, honest girl, and Lily is an angel. During the holidays, she stays with me. We bake cookies, watch soap operas. She teaches me things from school. Is the child a lot of work? Mrs. Rodriguez laughed. Work, for heaven's sake. She helps me with everything. She washes the dishes, organizes my medications, reads the newspaper for me because my eyesight is weak. She's the granddaughter I never had. And the father? Does Mr. Stevens appear there? Mrs. Rodriguez's face became serious. In 2 years, Doctor, I have seen him 3 times. 3 times. And of the 3, 2 were just to fight with Jane for money. What kind of fight? He would show up wanting her to lend him money, or asking to stay with the girl on weekends to impress his new girlfriend. But when Lily was sick or needed something, he would disappear off the face of the earth. David tried to defend himself. That's not true. I've always cared about my daughter. Mrs. Rodriguez turned to him with a pointed finger. You never cared about a thing, young man. When the girl had pneumonia last year, her mother was the one who ran with her to the hospital. You didn't even know she was sick. I didn't know, David stammered. You didn't know because you didn't want to know, Mrs. Rodriguez countered with firmness. Jane called you 5 times. 5! You didn't answer a single one. Lily took advantage of the moment. Your Honor, my father also alleged that I don't receive adequate medical care. I can prove that's a lie. She took a folder full of medical papers. Here are all my medical exams from the last 2 years. Pediatrician appointments every 6 months, dentist every 4 months. All my vaccines are up to date. The judge leafed through the documents, impressed with the organization. "And who pays for these appointments?" "My mother, Your Honor. She has health insurance from the company she works for, and when I need some more expensive medicine, she works extra on weekends to get the money." "What kind of extra?" "She cleans private homes on Saturdays and Sundays. She earns $50 per house. I've seen her clean 4 houses on a Saturday to buy my flu medicine." Jane cried profusely in the back of the room, moved to hear her daughter talk about her sacrifices. Meanwhile, Lily continued, looking directly at David. "My father has never paid a single dollar of my medical expenses, not even when I was hospitalized with pneumonia." "I didn't know you were hospitalized," David protested. "You didn't know because you didn't want to know," Lily replied with coldness. "My mother called you 7 times that day. You hung up on her." Attorney Anderson tried to change strategy. "Your Honor, financial matters are important, but they are not everything. What matters is the emotional bond." "Emotional bond?" Lily interrupted him. "You want to talk about emotional bonds, Doctor?" She took more photos from the folder. "These are pictures of my last birthday parties. 6 years old, 7 years old. As you can see, the people present are my mother, Mrs. Rodriguez, my teacher, Mrs. Evans, and some school friends." The judge examined the photos. They were simple parties, but full of affection. Lily was blowing out candles on a homemade cake, hugged by her mother. "And where is your father in these photos?" "He is not in any of them, Your Honor, because he has never come to my birthday parties." David turned red. I was working on my 6-year-old birthday." "You were at a steakhouse with your girlfriend," Lily said without emotion. "I saw the photos on her Facebook. For my 7-year-old birthday, you were at a beach. I saw the photos there too." David's embarrassment was visible to everyone in the courtroom. He couldn't refute any of his daughter's accusations because they were all true. "Your Honor," Lily continued relentlessly, "my father talks about an emotional bond, but I can prove that this bond has never existed on his part." She took a small notebook from the folder. "This is my diary. I have been writing in it for 2 years. May I read some excerpts?" "You may." Lily opened the notebook to a marked page. "September 15th of last year, 3 days after my birthday. Today it's been 3 days since I turned 7. Daddy didn't come to my party. Mommy said he was busy, but I saw her cry in the bathroom." The courtroom was in absolute silence. The innocence of those words was heartbreaking. "October 23rd, she continued reading. "Daddy came home today. He stayed for half an hour. He brought a present that still had the store tag on it. I think he bought it in a hurry. He didn't remember what my favorite doll was." Several people in the audience discreetly wiped their eyes. December 12th. "Daddy called today, said he was going to take me out on Sunday. I waited for him from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. He didn't come. Mommy made up an excuse, but I know he forgot." David could no longer look at his daughter. Every word from the diary was like a stab at his conscience. "Do you want me to continue, Your Honor?" Lily asked. "I have here notes of 15 promises my father made and did not keep." 15. "You don't need to continue," the judge said gently. "I understand, Doctor." Attorney Anderson made one last attempt. "Your Honor, children can exaggerate situations." "Exaggerate?" Lily turned to him with indignation. "Doctor, do you have children?" "I do." "Have you ever forgotten their birthday?" "No." "Have you ever promised to take them on an outing and not fulfilled it?" "No." "Have you gone months without seeing them?" "Never." "Then don't say I'm exaggerating. You wouldn't let your children go through this, but you think it's normal for me to?" The lawyer was left speechless. A 7-year-old girl had just given him a lesson in fatherhood. "Your Honor," Lily continued, turning her attention back to the judge, "I want to present one more important piece of evidence." She took a sealed envelope from the folder. "Here are all the messages my mother sent to my father in the last 2 years. WhatsApp, SMS, all printed and authenticated. The judge received the envelope. What kind is? Messages about me, informing him about medical appointments, school grades, school presentations, health problems. My mother always tried to keep my father informed about my life. And did he respond? Rarely, and when he did, it was always with a single word. Okay, right, cool. He never asked for details. He never was truly interested. Lily opened the envelope and took out some pages. May I read some? You may. Message from May 15th. David, Lily had a presentation at school today. She talked about professions and said she wants to be a lawyer to defend people. She was beautiful. Lily paused. His reply, okay. Message from July 3rd. Lily got a 10 on her English test. The teacher said she writes better than many older children. I'm so proud. Another pause. His reply, cool. Message from August 18th. David, Lily has had a fever for 2 days. I'm taking her to the doctor tomorrow. If you want to come, the appointment is at 9 a.m. at the health clinic. A longer pause. His reply, none. He didn't even respond. The courtroom was in total silence. It was impossible to hear that and not be moved. Your Honor, Lily said, putting the messages away, is this an emotional bond? Is this a present father? Is this paternal love? The judge shook his head. No, Lily, it's definitely not. That's why, she continued, when I found out that my father wants my custody just to manage my inheritance, I wasn't surprised. I was sad, but not surprised. She turned to David one last time. Father, for 7 years, I dreamed that one day you would truly love me, that you would want to spend time with me, to meet my friends, to help me with my homework, to hold me when I was sad. Her voice started to tremble, but she held firm. Now I understand that will never happen, because to love a person, you first have to see them as a person, not as an object. David tried to speak. Lily, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, she cut him off. I understand that to you I am just a means to get rich. And you know what else? I accept that, but I won't be an accomplice. She turned to the judge. Therefore, Your Honor, in addition to renouncing the inheritance, I have one last request. What is it? I want it to be officially recorded that I do not wish for any visitation or contact with my father. I do not want to be forced to meet with someone who sees me as money, not as a daughter. The final bombshell exploded in the courtroom. David stood up desperately. You can't do that. I'm your father. A blood father, Lily replied with devastating calm. The father of my heart is the one who raised me, educated me, and loved me every day. That was my mother. Attorney Anderson was officially defeated. There was no longer any legal or emotional argument that could save his client. Your Honor, Lily made her final conclusion. Based on all the evidence presented, I request that my custody remain exclusively with my mother, Jane Peterson, and that any future request for visitation by the petitioner, David Stevens, be denied. She closed her unicorn folder with the solemnity of an experienced lawyer. That is all the evidence I have to present. The judge was silent for long seconds, processing everything he had witnessed. Never, in 3 decades of his career, had he seen anything as impressive as that. 7-year-old girl defending her own family with the competence of a seasoned jurist. Lily, he finally said, you are an extraordinary girl. Your arguments are impeccable, your evidence is irrefutable, and your maturity is impressive. Thank you, Your Honor. But before you give your decision, I need to ask a question. How did you learn all this? How did a 7-year-old child manage to master family law with such precision? Lily smiled for the second time during the hearing. That's a long story, Your Honor. It started 3 weeks ago when I found out the truth about my father. You can tell it. The entire courtroom leaned forward, curious to know how that extraordinary girl had gotten to that point. I can, Lily said. But it's a story that will not only explain how I learned the law, but how I discovered that love is worth more than any amount of money in the world." The judge sat back in his chair. "I'm listening, Ms. Lily." It was time to tell how it all began, how an ordinary girl had transformed herself into a small warrior capable of facing her own father in court, and how she had discovered that sometimes children need to teach adults what really matters in life. The story was only in the middle, and the best was yet to come. "It all started 3 weeks ago," Lily said, looking at the judge with the same seriousness she had maintained throughout the hearing. "It was a rainy Thursday, March 15th, 2:30 in the afternoon. I was in my room playing school with my dolls when I heard my father talking on the phone. The courtroom was in absolute silence. Everyone wanted to understand how that extraordinary girl had gotten there. "It wasn't normal for him to call our house," she continued. "He hadn't been in contact for almost 6 months. My mom was at work, so I was alone with my dolls, pretending I was their teacher." She paused, as if reliving that moment. "I heard his voice coming from the living room, and I thought, how strange for Daddy to be here. Because normally he wouldn't even come into the house. When he would come to pick me up for an outing, he would wait in the building lobby. Then I realized he was on the phone. He wasn't actually in the living room, but his voice was very loud, so I left my dolls and went to the bedroom door to listen better." Lily took a deep breath, as if preparing to relive the most painful moment of her life. "The first thing I heard was, 'Listen carefully, lawyer. I want custody of the girl, and I want it fast. I don't care what you have to invent.' And I thought, girl? What girl? Is he talking about me?" The courtroom remained in a deathly silence. Even the clerks had stopped typing to listen. Then he continued, "The girl is going to inherit some good money from her grandfather when she turns 18. I'm talking about almost $2 million. And it was at that moment, Your Honor, that my world fell apart." Lily's voice trembled slightly, but she held firm. $2 million. I didn't even know I had a rich grandfather, let alone that I was going to inherit something. But what hurt me the most wasn't finding out about the money. It was realizing that my father was talking about me as if I were an object, not a person. Jane cried softly in the back of the room, reliving the pain her daughter had felt that day. Then he said, "If I get custody, I'm the one who gets to manage that money." And I understood. "Everything, Your Honor. My father didn't want me back because he missed me, because he loved me, because he wanted to be my father for real. He wanted me as a bank account." Lily paused to control her emotion, but the part that hurt the most came next. He said, "The girl's mother knows nothing about the inheritance. That woman can barely read, let alone understand inheritance." The contempt in her voice as she repeated her father's words made several people in the courtroom shake their heads in indignation. At that moment, Your Honor, I felt a rage I had never felt in my life, not for myself, but for my mother. How could he have the audacity to talk about the woman who raised me alone, the woman who works 12 hours a day to give me everything I need? Lily turned to look at Jane in the back of the room. "My mother may not have studied much, but she is the smartest person I know. She can do math in her head better than any calculator. She knows when I'm sad just by looking at my face. She can make the best chocolate cake in the world with simple ingredients." Some people in the audience smiled through their tears. After that, he said, "By the time she finds out anything, I'll have already taken care of everything." He laughed at my mother, he laughed at me, he laughed at the whole situation, as if it were a big joke. Lily's indignation was palpable. "That's when I understood I had to do something. I couldn't let him use our ignorance about the inheritance to separate us. So I did something I learned from watching detective movies on television." "What did you do?" the judge asked curiously. "I ran to the room, grabbed my mother's cell phone, and went back near the door. I put the phone on record mode and captured the rest of the conversation." Attorney Anderson tried to object. "Your Honor, a clandestine recording." "Doctor," Lily interrupted him politely, I was 7 years old and I was trying to protect my family. I didn't know I was making a clandestine recording. I just knew I needed proof of what my father was planning. The judge nodded in agreement. Continue, Lily. I managed to record when he said, "File the custody request tomorrow. Claim the mother is unfit. Invent that she leaves the child alone, that she has no structure, all those things you guys know how to do." The courtroom grew tense. Everyone was hearing how that judicial farce had been planned. And the final part, "That woman can barely read," followed by that cruel laugh that made me want to vomit. Lily paused for a few seconds, as if reliving the nausea of that moment. When he hung up, I ran to the bathroom and threw up. Not because I was sick, but because I had discovered that my own father was capable of lying in court to use me as a tool for enrichment. The silence in the courtroom was awkward. Then I sat on the bathroom floor, crying for almost an hour. I didn't know what to do with that information. How could I tell my mother that her ex-husband was planning a judicial trap? Mrs. Evans, who was next to Lily, squeezed the girl's shoulder in silent support. When my mother came home from work that night, I watched her take off her sore shoes, complaining of back pain, but always with a smile for me, and I thought, how am I going to destroy her peace by telling her this? "And what did you decide to do?" the judge asked. First, I tried to act as if nothing had happened. We had dinner together. She helped me with my homework. We watched a cartoon on television, but when we went to sleep, I couldn't stop thinking. Lily looked at the courtroom ceiling, as if she was seeing the scene again. I stayed awake all night, watching my mother sleep. She was sleeping next to me in our small room after a long day of hard work, and I thought, she doesn't deserve to go through this. She doesn't deserve to be deceived again. Again? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor. My father had deceived my mother before. When he left home, he said he was going to take some time to think about his life. She waited for him to come back for almost a year. Then she found out he was living with another woman. David sank even further into his chair, being publicly exposed for all his lies and betrayal. The next day, Friday, I went to school with an idea in my head, to tell everything to my teacher, Mrs. Evans. She has always been like a second mother to me. Mrs. Evans smiled through her tears, proud of the trust Lily had placed in her. During recess, instead of playing with my classmates, I went to the classroom where Mrs. Evans was correcting tests. I knocked on the door and asked if I could talk to her about something very serious. And how did she react? The judge asked. She saw that I was different. I'm normally a happy, playful child, but that day I was serious, worried. She dropped her tests immediately and gave me her full attention. Lily turned to Mrs. Evans with gratitude. I told her everything. The call, the inheritance, my father's plan, the recording I had made. She listened to me in absolute silence, and when I finished, I saw tears in her eyes. What did she say? The first thing she said was, "Lily, you are a very brave girl." Then she asked if I was sure about everything I had heard. I asked her to listen to the record. Mrs. Evans confirmed with a nod. It was one of the most shocking moments of my career as a teacher. When she heard the recording, Lily continued, Mrs. Evans was outraged. She said that was inadmissible, that my father had no right to play with our family that way. And what was her advice? She said that I needed to tell my mother everything immediately, that my mother had a right to know what was happening even if it was painful. Lily looked at Jane in the back of the room. But I was afraid, Your Honor, afraid that my mother wouldn't know how to defend herself. She has always been very simple, very trusting of people. I knew she would be lost in a courtroom, facing expensive lawyers and serious judges. That's when Mrs. Evans told me something that changed everything. What did she say? That before she was a teacher, she had studied law for 2 years in college. She didn't graduate because she had to work to support her family, but she knew the basic laws about family and children. The courtroom paid close attention. It was the crucial moment of the story. She explained to me that there was a legal possibility for me to represent my family in court, not as an official lawyer, of course, but as a family assistant. She said it was rare, but the law allowed it. And did you accept this possibility? At first, I thought it was crazy. How could a 7-year-old girl face off against trained lawyers in a courtroom? But then, Mrs. Evans asked me a question that changed my perspective. What question? She asked, Lily, what's more important, being afraid or protecting the one you love? And at that moment, I understood that I had no choice. Either I learned to defend myself, or my father would manage to separate us. Lily took a deep breath, reliving that moment of decision. That's when I said to Mrs. Evans, "Then teach me. Teach me everything I need to know to defend my mother." And she replied, "Lily, it's going to be very difficult. You're going to have to study complicated laws, memorize articles, understand things that even adults have a hard time with. And you didn't give up. On the contrary, Your Honor. The more she said it was difficult, the more certain I was that I would succeed. Because when you truly love someone, there's no such thing as too difficult." The courtroom was completely absorbed by the narrative. That same afternoon, Mrs. Evans went to our house to talk to my mother. She told her everything: the call, the inheritance, my father's plan, my idea of defending ourselves in court. How did your mother react? First, she cried. She cried a lot. Not from sadness, but from anger. Anger at being deceived again. Anger at seeing that her ex-husband wanted to use her daughter as an object. Jane confirmed with a nod, remembering that painful day. Then she became desperate. "How am I going to defend myself?" she asked. "I don't know anything about the law. I don't have money for a lawyer. I'm going to lose my daughter to that terrible man." Is that when you stepped in? Yes. I approached my mother, held her hands, and said, "Mom, you're not going to lose me. I'm going to be your lawyer. I'll learn everything necessary to protect our family." Lily smiled at the memory of that moment. My mother looked at me as if I had gone crazy. "Lily, you're 7 years old." But I replied, "So what? I'm 7 years old, but I have enough love for you to face the whole world." Several people in the courtroom discreetly wiped their eyes. Mrs. Evans explained to my mother that it was possible that I could represent our family with her. Supervision, that we would study together, prepare all the evidence, organize all the arguments, and your mother agreed. At first, she hesitated. She was afraid that I would be exposed to a situation that was too heavy for my age. But when I showed her the recording of my father, when she heard with her own ears his contempt for our family, she understood that we had no choice. Lily looked directly at David. "My mother heard you talking about her as if she were garbage, Father. She heard you planning to deceive us, use us, separate us, and then she understood that she had to fight." David couldn't maintain eye contact with his daughter. That night, the three of us sat at the kitchen table and made a pact. We were going to study together, work together, fight together. We were not going to let anyone destroy our family for money. And how did the studies begin? On Saturday morning, Mrs. Evans appeared at our house with a suitcase full of law books, civil code, children and adolescent statute, federal constitution. It looked like she had brought an entire library. Lily laughed at the memory of the scene. She spread all the books on our small kitchen table and said, "Lily, if you want to be your mother's lawyer, you need to study like one. Let's start with the basics. What is parental authority?" Was it difficult at first? Very difficult, Your Honor. The first words I read seemed to be in another language. Parental authority, unilateral custody, best interest of the minor. I didn't understand anything. How did you overcome this difficulty? Mrs. Evans was very patient. She explained each legal term in simple words. For example, when I read parental authority, she explained, It is the right and duty of parents to take care of their children, but this power has limits. It cannot be used against the child's interest. Lily looked at Mrs. Evans with gratitude. She transformed complicated laws into language I could understand. And the most incredible thing is, the more I learned, the more interested I became. It was as if I had discovered a secret language that could protect people. How much time did you study per day? Every day after school, from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., on weekends, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., with breaks for lunch and snacks. The judge was impressed. 3 weeks of intensive study. Exactly. And do you know what the most interesting part was, Your Honor? What? I discovered that I had a facility for memorizing laws. It was as if my brain were a sponge for legal information. In 1 week, I was already memorizing entire articles of the Civil Code. Mrs. Evans confirmed proudly. Lily has an exceptional intelligence for the law. In 2 weeks, she knew more about custody and parental authority than many lawyers. But the most important part of the studies wasn't memorizing laws, Lily continued. It was understanding that the law exists to protect people, especially the most vulnerable. And at that moment, my mother and I were the most vulnerable. How so? My father had money to hire an expensive lawyer. He had knowledge about the inheritance that we didn't have. He had experience in manipulating situations. We only had one thing in our favor. What? The truth, Lily said with devastating simplicity. And I discovered that when you have the truth on your side and you know the laws that protect that truth, you can face any opponent. The courtroom was moved by that life lesson. From a 7-year-old child. That's how, Your Honor, an ordinary girl transformed herself into her own mother's lawyer. Not out of ambition, not out of revenge, but out of pure and simple love. Lily looked at everyone in the courtroom. And now you know how I got here. Through 3 weeks of the most intense studies of my life, driven by the determination not to let anyone destroy my family. The judge was silent for a few seconds, processing that extraordinary story. Lily, he finally said, you are living proof that when a child is driven by true love, they can move mountains. Thank you, Your Honor. But the story isn't over yet. What do you mean? I still have to tell you how I transformed all this knowledge into a strategy for this courtroom and how I prepared every piece of evidence I presented today. The judge smiled. Then continue, Ms. Lily. We are all curious to know the rest. It was time to tell the second part of that extraordinary journey, how a 7-year-old girl had prepared to face her own father in the most important courtroom of her life. After 2 weeks of studying law, Lily continued her narrative to the fascinated courtroom. I already knew all the laws about custody and parental authority, but Mrs. Evans taught me that knowing the law is only half the job. The other half is knowing how to use that knowledge in a courtroom. The judge settled more comfortably in his chair, completely absorbed in the story. It was on a Monday, April 3rd, that Mrs. Evans came to our house with news that changed everything. She had received a call from the school informing her that a court officer had delivered a judicial summons to my mother. Jane confirmed with a sad nod. She remembered that terrible day perfectly. My mother opened the envelope with trembling hands, Lily continued. It was my father's official petition requesting my custody. When she started reading aloud, I saw that everything was exactly as he had planned in the phone. A conversation. What were the allegations? The judge asked, although he already knew the answer. Material and emotional abandonment by my mother, neglect of medical care, inadequate family environment, lack of school supervision. All lies, but very well crafted legally. Lily paused, remembering her mother's desperate expression. My mother started to cry and said, Lily, how am I going to prove that this is a lie? Who is going to believe a cleaner against a man who has money to hire an expensive lawyer? And it was at that moment that I understood I needed to be more than a child who knew laws. I needed to be a true strategist. Mrs. Evans smiled proudly as she remembered that turning point. Mrs. Evans sat down with me at the kitchen table and said, "Lily, now we are going to transform you into a real lawyer. It's not enough to know the laws. You need to learn how to build a solid defense, organize evidence, anticipate the adversary's argument." "How did you do that?" the judge asked, genuinely curious. "First, Mrs. Evans taught me to think like a lawyer. She said, 'Imagine you are your father's lawyer. What arguments would you use?' And I started to list them. I would say that my mother works a lot and leaves me alone, that our house is small, that she doesn't have an education, that she can't give me a better future." Lily showed an impressive maturity in analyzing the situation. Then she asked, "And how would you refute each of those arguments?" That's when my true legal education began. Explain better. For each of my father's lies, we needed irrefutable evidence. He said, "I'm left alone. We were going to prove that I am at school for the full day." He said, "Our house is inadequate. We were going to photograph every room." He said, "I don't have medical care. We were going to gather all my exams and appointments." The courtroom followed every word with full attention. But Mrs. Evans taught me that it wasn't enough to have the evidence. I needed to know how to present it convincingly. "Lily," she said, "in court, it's not enough to be right. You have to prove that you are right." "And how did you organize that evidence?" "We transformed our house into a real law firm. The kitchen table became our work table. My mother bought several plastic folders, and we started to organize everything by categories." Lily gestured as she explained, showing the same organization she had demonstrated in court. "Folder number 1, school documents, report card, statements, attendance history, letters of recommendation from the teacher. Folder number 2, medical documents, exams, prescriptions, appointment receipts, up-to-date vaccination card." "How many folders did you make?" 8 folders, Your Honor." Folder 3, house documents, lease agreement, paid bills, photos of all the rooms. Folder 4, financial proof, my mother's salary receipts, bank statements, receipts for everything she bought for me. The judge was impressed with the meticulous organization. Folder 5, evidence of paternal abandonment, all the messages my mother sent to my father without a response. Photos of my birthdays where he didn't show up, proof that he never paid child support. David shrunk even further in his chair, seeing his negligence systematically documented. Folder 6, depositions from people who know us, Mrs. Rodriguez, neighbors, school staff. Folder 7, the recording of my father's conversation and all the legal analyses we made about it. And Folder 8 was special. Lily smiled for the first time during the flashback. "It was my legal arguments folder, all the articles of law I had memorized, organized by topic, with simple explanations that I wrote myself." Mrs. Evans leaned forward. "May I add something, Your Honor?" "Of course." Lily created her own study system. She would take each article of law, read it several times until she memorized it, then she would write in her own words what that article meant in practice. For example, Article 1634 of the Civil Code. Lily recited from memory. "The law says it is the full exercise of parental authority for both parents, regardless of their marital status." My translation: "It doesn't matter if the parents are married or separated, both have responsibility for their children." The judge smiled. "Very intelligent. But then comes the practical part," Lily continued. "Since my father abandoned that responsibility for 3 years, he lost the right to claim parental authority only when it's financially convenient for him." "Did you study every possible defense argument?" "Every single one, Your Honor. Mrs. Evans played the role of my father's lawyer, and I had to refute every argument. It was like a game, but a very serious game." "Give me an example." "She would say, 'Lily, your father's lawyer is going to allege that he has better financial conditions to raise you.' And I would reply, Article 1583 of the Civil Code establishes that custody must consider not only material conditions, but mainly emotional bonds and the ability to provide proper education and development. The courtroom was impressed with the meticulous preparation. Then I would add, my mother may not have a lot of money, but she gave me an exemplary education, constant medical care, and most importantly, unconditional love. My father has money, but he doesn't have love. And money without love doesn't raise healthy children. How did you simulate the hearing? That was the most important part of the preparation. Lily became animated. Mrs. Evans transformed our living room into a mini courtroom. She would sit in a high chair playing the role of the judge. My mother would be in the audience, and I had to present all the arguments as if it were the real hearing. And how was it at the beginning? Terrible, Lily laughed. I would get nervous, forget the laws, stutter. But Mrs. Evans was patient. She would say, Lily, you're not just defending a case. You're defending your family. Remember that when you get nervous. Mrs. Evans confirmed. We repeated the simulation more than 20 times until Lily could present all the arguments naturally. But the most difficult part wasn't memorizing the laws, Lily continued. It was emotionally preparing myself to face my father. The courtroom paid close attention. It was the most delicate moment of the preparation. Mrs. Evans explained to me that in court, my father and his lawyer were going to try to disqualify me, to humiliate me, to make me look like a child playing adult. She said, Lily, they're going to attack you personally because they can't attack your arguments. How did you prepare for that? By practicing staying calm in difficult situations. Mrs. Evans simulated the attacks I might receive. She would say things like, you're just a child, you don't understand anything about the law. And I had to respond calmly, citing laws and maintaining my politeness. Did it work? It took me a while to learn. At first I would get angry and want to shout back, but Mrs. Evans taught me that in court, whoever loses their composure loses credibility. Lily looked directly at Attorney Anderson, who had tried to disqualify her throughout the hearing. She taught me that when someone attacks you personally, instead of attacking your arguments, it's because they have no arguments to refute. And that's a victory, not a defeat. The most important lesson came. 3 days before the hearing, Lily continued. I was nervous, afraid of failing, afraid of losing my mother. Mrs. Evans sat down with me and said, Lily, do you want to know what your greatest power in court is? What was it? She said, your greatest power is the truth. You're not going to win because you're intelligent, although you are. You're not going to win because you know the laws, or do. You're going to win because you are defending what is right. The courtroom was silent, absorbing that profound lesson. Your father is lying, she continued. His lawyer knows he's lying. The judge will realize they are lying, and when people lie in court to harm a child, they always lose. Did that calm you down? Completely. Because I understood that I didn't need to be perfect. I just needed to be honest and well prepared. And what was the final preparation like? On the eve of the hearing, we did our last simulation, but this time, instead of training legal arguments, Mrs. Evans asked me a different question. What question, Lily? If you could say just one thing to the judge, what would it be? And I replied without hesitation, that I don't want to be rich with a father who doesn't love me. I prefer to be happy with a mother who truly loves me. Several people in the courtroom discreetly wiped their eyes. Mrs. Evans smiled and said, Good, you are prepared, because that sentence is worth more than all the legal articles in the world. And did you sleep well on the eve? I slept badly, Lily admitted. I kept imagining what it would be like to face my father, what it would be like to talk to a real judge, what it would be like if I failed. But my mother noticed that I was worried. She lay down next to me in bed and said, Lily, no matter what happens tomorrow, I'm already proud of you. Seeing my 7-year-old daughter fighting to defend our family is the most beautiful thing I have ever witnessed in my life. Jane cried softly. remembering that night of anguish and pride. Then she told me something that changed everything. She said, "You know why I'm so calm, even knowing that I might lose you? Because if I lose you, it won't be because of my omission. It will be because we fought together and destiny wanted it that way. But at least we'll know we did everything possible." Did that calm you? Totally, because I understood that the result didn't depend only on me. It depended on justice, on truth, and on the love that drove our entire fight. And what was the morning of the hearing like? I woke up at 5 a.m., even without an alarm clock. I took a shower, put on my best clothes, a little white blouse and a blue skirt that my mother had bought especially for the court. Were you nervous? I was, but it was a different kind of nervousness. It wasn't a fear of failing. It was an eagerness to show everything I had learned. And your mother? My mother was more nervous than I was. Lily smiled. She reviewed my folder 3 times, checked if I had brought all the documents, asked if I remembered all the laws and the way to the courthouse. On the bus, I mentally went over all the arguments, but I also did something Mrs. Evans had taught me. What? I prayed. I'm not very religious, but I asked God to give me strength to defend my family with dignity. And when you arrived at the courthouse, when you saw that big, imposing building full of serious people in suits, your heart pounded. I thought, how is a 7-year-old girl going to face all this? What gave you courage? My mother held my hand and said, "Remember, my daughter, you are not here to impress anyone. You are here to tell the truth." And Mrs. Evans added, "And the truth always wins in the end." Was that when you went in? We walked together to the door of the courtroom. Before entering, I made sure to organize my folder, take a deep breath, and mentally go over everything I had studied. And what was your first thought when you saw the judge? I thought he seems like a good person, someone who will listen to what I have to say, and that's when all my preparation made sense. How so? Because I understood that I wasn't there to show that I was intelligent or to impress anyone. I was there to protect my family, using the tools I had learned. Lily looked at the judge with gratitude. And when I introduced myself saying, "I am my mother's lawyer," it wasn't a child playing adult. It was a daughter defending the person she loves most in the world. The courtroom was in emotional silence. That's how, Your Honor, 3 weeks of intensive study, unconditional love, and fierce determination transformed an ordinary girl into the youngest lawyer this court has ever seen. And now, Lily? The judge asked, "How do you feel after telling this whole story?" I feel at peace, Your Honor, because regardless of your decision, I know I fought with honor for my family and discovered that when a child is driven by true love, they can move mountains. Lily closed her unicorn folder for the last time. That's what I wanted to tell about how I became my mother's lawyer, not out of ambition, not out of revenge, but out of pure and true love. The judge was silent for long seconds, processing that extraordinary story of courage, determination, and family love. It was time to return to the present. It was time for the decision that would forever change the life of that courageous family. Judge Harrison was in absolute silence for almost 2 minutes after Lily finished her narrative, 2 minutes that felt like 2 hours to everyone in the courtroom. He took off his glasses, carefully cleaned them, looked at that extraordinary 7-year-old girl, and then at the documents scattered on his desk. "Lily," he finally said, with a voice that carried 3 decades of experience, "in 30 years of my career, I have witnessed thousands of cases. I have seen brilliant lawyers, emotional witnesses, irrefutable evidence, but never ever have I seen anything like what I witnessed today." The courtroom was in a deathly silence. Every person present knew they were experiencing a unique moment in the history of justice. "You are not just a smart girl who memorized some laws," the judge continued, looking directly into Lily's brown eyes. "You are a living example that true justice is born from love, from courage, and from the determination to protect those we love. David buried his face in his hands, knowing his defeat was total and irreversible. Attorney Anderson nervously organized his papers, not knowing how to react to the public humiliation he had suffered. Based on all the evidence presented, the judge stood up solemnly, and considering the clear and unequivocal manifestation of the minor Lily about her own desires, this court decided. The silence was deafening. Jane held Mrs. Evans' hands, both crying with anxiety. Mrs. Rodriguez prayed softly. Lily maintained her erect posture, prepared for any outcome. The custody of the minor Lily Peterson remains exclusively with her mother, Jane Peterson, and the petitioner's request, David Stevens, is denied. The courtroom erupted in applause. People who didn't even know the family clapped, moved. Justice employees, normally serious and impartial, smiled openly. Jane broke down, crying from relief and happiness. Furthermore, the judge continued when the silence returned, I determine that any future requests for visitation or contact by the petitioner be denied, as requested by the minor herself. David tried to stand up. Your Honor, this is Mr. Stevens. The judge interrupted him with authority. You had 7 years to be a father to this exceptional child. You chose abandonment. Now you want to come back just for financial interest. This court does not condone this type of opportunity. But I have rights. Rights are earned with fulfilled duties, Lily said, getting up from her chair. You never fulfilled your duties as a father. Therefore you have lost all your rights. The judge struck his gavel. This hearing is adjourned. But the story was just beginning. 3 months later, Jane's cell phone rang at 7 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday. On the other end of the line, an animated voice. Mrs. Peterson, this is from CBS News. Lily's story has gone viral nationwide. We would like to do an interview for 60 minutes. It was true. The recording of the hearing, authorized by the judge for educational purposes, had spread across the internet like wildfire. Lily the lawyer was trending on Twitter. Law pages shared her legal arguments. Mothers cried, watching her emotional defense of her family. Mom, look at this! Lily shouted from the living room, pointing to the television. On the screen, her speech about love versus money was playing on the morning news. I don't want to be famous, Lily said with the same maturity as always. I want other children to see that they can fight for their rights. 5 years later, Cecilia Silver, at 12 years old, to address the National Congress, the Speaker of the House announced. She went up to the main podium, now 12 years old, taller, more mature, but with the same determined eyes as when she was 7. Honorable members of Congress, her voice echoed through the packed chamber. 5 years ago, a 7-year-old girl stood in a courtroom and said, I am my mother's lawyer. Today, that same girl returns to show what her struggle has achieved. The audience was respectfully silent. I propose today the Children's Legal Education Act, that all schools in our country have a mandatory subject called Children's Rights, where boys and girls learn their basic rights, how to protect themselves, how to report abuse. Can children understand laws? Asked a congresswoman. Yes, they can. I learned the law at 7 years old, not because I'm special, but because when a child needs to defend themselves, they learn. Looked at the audience with intensity. Imagine a country where no child is a victim of abuse because they all know they can report it, where no child is manipulated in separations because they all know their rights, where no child needs to become their own mother's lawyer because all families know how to defend themselves. The ovation lasted 5 minutes. The bill was approved unanimously. 9 years later, Lily, at 21, the law school had never seen such a crowded graduation. Journalists, politicians, jurists, families who had been helped by the Lily's law. Everyone wanted to see the girl who changed the legal system officially graduate. Lily Peterson, the dean announced. graduating with honors, valedictorian of her class. When she went up to the stage to receive her diploma, the audience exploded in applause that lasted 10 minutes. Jane cried with pride in the front row next to Mrs. Evans. "Fellow graduates," Lily said into the microphone, "today we officially become lawyers, but being a lawyer is not just about knowing laws. It's about using those laws to protect those who need it. Therefore, I announce today the creation of the Lily Peterson Institute for the Defense of Children's Rights, a firm that will offer free defense to all children in vulnerable situations." The ovation was deafening. 7 years later, Lily, at 28. Time magazine's Person of the Year award arrived on a rainy Tuesday. Lily was in her office when she received the call. "Miss Peterson, congratulations. You have been chosen as Time's Person of the Year." At 28, she had become the youngest person to receive the award. On the magazine's cover, "The Girl Who Changed Justice, How Lily Peterson Revolutionized Children's Rights Worldwide." The Lily Peterson Institute, now operated in 12 countries, had protected more than 50,000 children. "Mom, look at this." Lily showed the magazine to Jane, who was now coordinating the social part of the institute. "My daughter is on the cover of Time," Jane said, crying with pride. "Who would have thought that little girl would change the world?" "I didn't change the world, Mom. I just used what you taught me. That love is worth more than money." That night at the awards dinner in New York, Lily gave a speech that moved the whole world. 21 years ago, she said into the microphone, a 7-year-old girl stood in a courtroom and said, "I am my mother's lawyer." Today, that sentence has become a symbol that children have a voice, they have rights, and they have the power to transform the world. The international audience was silent. "But I want to be clear. I am not special. I am just a child who had to grow up fast to protect those she loved. And I discovered that when we are moved by true love, we are capable of extraordinary things." Applause echoed through the auditorium in Manhattan. Today, more than 100 countries have adopted versions of Lily's law. Millions of children have access to justice. Families are protected from greed, all because a 7-year-old girl refused to be silenced. Lily looked at the cameras that were broadcasting live to the entire world. "Therefore, I leave a message for all the children who may be watching. You have a voice, you have rights, and when something is wrong in your lives, do not accept silence. Fight, seek help, protect those you love. Because sometimes," she concluded with a smile that recalled the courageous 7-year-old girl, "the small voices are the ones that echo most strongly in history." The standing ovation lasted 15 minutes, but for Lily, the most important award continued to be the same as it was 21 years ago. Having protected her family and discovered that love always triumphs over money. Her story had begun with a 7-year-old girl saying, "I am my mother's lawyer," and would continue forever as proof that when a child is moved by true love, they can truly change the world.